Okay, everybody. We are back. It is SIC Talks number 99. This is exciting. We're on the precipice of a centennial or a century, something like that. My guest today is Mo Diggs, who is the Substacker of Cross Current fame, also a writer for the Metropolitan Review, and somebody who I have discovered relatively recently, but who occupies a section of Substack in particular, but the internet in general, that I am very envious of and learn a lot from, but also have no interest in getting anywhere near, because it's done so well by people like Mo. So anyway, Mo, nice to meet you. Or nice to meet you, nice to welcome you, and all of the things.
Thank you so much. Obviously, it's ironic that I'm doing episode 99, like so close to getting the 100th episode, but that's okay. That's fine.
Listen, if there were any calculation whatsoever in the way that I programmed, then maybe there would be, you could feel a type of way about it, but
That's
trust me,
fine.
it's all totally accidental.
I'm actually happy with that. I like that off-center kind of thing. I kind of dig it. But yeah, thanks for having me,
Of
and
course.
yeah, I'm actually flattered that you think, and honored that you think I write about it well, because it is not easy to write about.
No, and
Literally, when I'm doing it, it's not easy to write about.
No, and that's sort of the thing. So, I mean, how would you describe what you write about at Cross Current? I guess that's part of the interest in me, for me, is like trying to triangulate what the subject matter is.
I mean, I just like to write about culture in general. I tend to skew towards American culture, although I try to catch myself and acknowledge that we should acknowledge international. In fact, I think a
Right.
common theme I have is that I'll talk about how for decades American culture has been very insular, and that's really starting to change now. But just to keep back to the point, I do think that I tend to talk about culture, but because tech is such a huge part of culture, I have no choice but to talk
Yeah,
about
of
tech.
course. Of course.
Just like, for example, I am a Gen Xer,
As am I.
and I thought, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I learned by listening to you on the Xanadu Review podcast just recently, that you and I are both right now 49. Although
Oh,
I'm headed to 50 soon, and it sounds like you just turned the corner. So for now,
yes.
we can wear our Niners jerseys and
So just with the Gen X thing, even though I am Gen X, needless to say, I have to discuss, as I said on the Xanadu review, I have to discuss Gen Z because they're the generation of the moment.
yeah, of course.
But I do tend to focus on culture. I think the difference, because I never would have gone forward with it unless there was some kind of difference. And I think well, I never would have tried to make it a thing until there was a difference. The angle that I have is I try to look at parallels between what's happening now and what's happened in the past with different media, which obviously it's never going to be the same exact story, but I do tend to find quite startling parallels with what's gone on before and what's happening now.
I was reading your piece about the current age. Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up here. It is, well, I mean, it's about the piece is titled "The Vive Ship's Been Over. We're in an entirely new era." This is from just after the turn of the year in January. But the thing that I was struck by when I read it in the first place, and I think it might have been the post that kind of introduced me to you. There might have been one before it, but was just, the way that you characterize history through these eras and identify this new one, which you call the big gap, which is from 2023 onward. What I wondered about as I was reading this, I was like, okay, is this guy like a historian, or is this guy a sort of like an autodidact who has coalesced all of this understanding of history, or are you just, I don't know, a ChatGPTing the whole thing and just making it up as you go along? You know what I mean? Like, how does it all? So I'm interested, wondered what your background is to get into that level of depth and analysis, because it's impressive.
Yeah, I'm pretty much, well, thank you. I'm pretty much an autodidact. I mean, I am an English major, so
Okay.
there's that. But other than that, history, I don't know. I was reading Ross Barkin the other day. he was talking about the muscular humanities.
Okay.
And I don't know
Muscular
why
humanities. I like
that's
that.
the name of the piece. It's a
Oh yeah, I
beautiful
haven't
piece,
read that,
yeah.
but yeah, that's cool.
And I don't know why it's going to sound so dumb, but I always forget that history is part of the humanities. I always look at the humanities
Interesting.
as kind of a, kind of touchy-feely sort of field.
Sure. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
always forget that
Creative arts.
history, right, and I always forget that history is technically a humanity, but I don't know how we could possibly think about anything without history. So, I mean,
Right.
certainly, yeah, I'm an amateur historian. That's why I told you to call me a Substacker. I'm an amateur critic. I'm an amateur historian. I gotta tell you the origin story, which for those
Yeah.
of you who
Please.
haven't heard the Xanadu review, um, or maybe I haven't said it on the Xanadu. Anyway, with PJ Andrews, what I was doing, I was working in a hospital. I am still working in a hospital
Okay.
as a billing coordinator. And I don't know if you or anybody in the audience, if you've worked a corporate job. So when you
Yeah.
work a corporate job, you get trained on a lot of different applications, right? A
Sure.
lot of
Of
different,
course.
yes. So because you're being trained on these applications, so we'll just like make something up like Zoofin or something, just a stupid name,
Wow.
And then
That is not one I have been trained on, Mo. I have to tell you, but
that is actually
keep
one
going.
syllable off from a real one, by the way. I literally changed one syllable.
Oh, I
So
see you. Oh, I thought that was like
so it
maybe one
wasn't
that was
even
specific to
off
like
to,
healthcare vertical or something.
well, it's one syllable off from something that is specific to healthcare, exactly.
Okay,
So you're
got
not
it.
that far off. So anyway, let's say you're training for that. Uh, they typically, well, especially where I work, they don't want you to go in right away. They want to like make sure you have your training. They'll
Of
give you
course.
hours of training. So the point being, there were a lot of days and hours where I had nothing to do, but I kind of felt guilty. I wanted to look busy. So after doing some uh, genuinely trying to do some busy work, I opened up Microsoft Word and I just wrote some stuff about like, I don't know, I think I might have written about like Dime Square or something like that.
Yeah,
And
I want to
I
ask about
made,
that.
and well, we'll get to that in a minute, but
Yeah, yeah, please.
I made a fake newsletter called Foisted. And the joke was that I'd foist it onto my two friends. I'd send them unsolicited emails. That was it was a bit. This literally
Right.
started as a bit.
Okay,
That's
got
all
it.
this ever was meant to be. One friend that I still talk to this day, we talk every night pretty much, he literally disregarded, which is hilarious to me. The other friend, longtime friend, original fan of the Substack, Trafton Crandall, he has his own Substack called Beyond
Okay.
the Horizon.
Okay.
But he kept urging me. Well, he urged me to go on Substack. Well, actually, he urged me to go on Medium and then Substack. I'm like, I'm
Sure.
not doing Medium. I don't know what that means, but I'm not doing Medium. Maybe
Right.
Substack. I am not. It's going to get you more followers. I don't care.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so the point being that a lot of my early posts, if those of you at home even want to dig deep, you'll see they were really just a lot of ravings. Not to say they're not ravings now, but there's some pretense at logic and coherence and something attempting to do something good. Back then, it was literally like, all right, Trafton, you still think I should do this? I
Yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah,
know. Are
yeah.
you sure about that, buddy? So,
That's funny. Well, I mean, look, I think and yeah, it's funny. I just literally came from a cocktail. So we're recording at an unusual time. We're recording at night tonight, which is atypical for Sick Talk. But I came from a cocktails and ran into a friend of mine who was telling me that one of the biggest unlocks in his life ever was a oh no, sorry. He was an unlock that he discovered, but it was also one that he now puts at the end of these lectures that he gives to student groups. But which is basically like, you can do anything. Like you can kind of just decide to do it and do it. And it's a sort of a weird. It's become this sort of weird Silicon Valley coded, you know, like pro existential, anthem now. Apparently, Sam Altman tweeted it yesterday or something. But anyway, the point more so was it sounds like you just decided to do it and you did it and it gained a little bit of traction and now it is, this outlet that people far flung like me pay attention to. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, that's a accurate characterization. That's yeah, I
All
guess.
right.
Yeah, I mean the only thing I would add is that in the very beginning it was less me deciding to do it and me more being nudged to do it
Yeah,
and
yeah, sure.
doing it just to shut my friend up. But yeah, eventually it did kind of take on a life of its own and I did start doing it for
Yeah.
real. Yeah.
It's funny. It for me putting together the SIC newsletter every Thursday. It is, I describe it all the time as being as like scraping the plaque off my brain. It's a like a because become kind of a mental health exercise. Like I wake up in the morning, I
Yes.
spend 2 hours just like going through everything, getting myself up to date, putting things aside and stuff. But it's very much a muscle that needed to be exercised. When I was doing it in the first place, I was inside Vice Media at the time, and I was creating it for my colleagues who I just wanted to be aware of the stuff I was talking about as kind of shorthand. And people, I would have stopped long ago, except that people encouraged me in that way. They were just like, "This is good. This is valuable. This is useful. Keep going to it." And now I do it as a reflex, and I kind of can't not do it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way? Are you kind of like, do you feel
Right.
compelled to
Yeah.
write?
That's literally where I've gotten. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
same thing as me. Yeah. I mean, I was compelled to write in the beginning, but in the beginning, I was very allergic to being taken seriously. And then as time
Interesting.
went on, I just kind of, well, again, it started as a goof. So
Yeah, sure.
I,
So it's sort of hard to
but,
believe that it can be taken seriously then in a certain
oh,
respect.
if I mean, this part should be easy. I would urge anyone at home or you yourself just go to those early posts, just look at the like counts. To this day, I have very early posts from 2022 that still only have one or two likes.
Sure,
Like no
sure,
one's
sure.
bothered to go back and say, you know what, this is kind of a lost gem. Let's give this a look. To this day, there's just people who, so when you're getting one or two likes, I mean, how seriously should you take yourself?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
how
That's
can
true.
you take yourself? I should say, because
That's true.
that, yeah.
I tend to my like count is very, I have a very peculiar relationship to like count because I tend to feel that because I'm essentially like repackaging, reordering, doing some level of data pattern recognition. Um, People aren't hearing me necessarily, and I don't think they feel as parasocially attached to me. They use it more as a pure
Hmm.
information source. But consequently, like I don't get a lot of likes on the newsletter, and I don't really judge it by that either.
That's wise. And just to comment on your newsletter, uh, I didn't. Well, let me explain. Well, I mean, it's fine that it was a burn, but it was also not meant to be a burn. It was also like, so likes obviously are a very strange form of validation that
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
we
for sure.
shouldn't hang our hats on at the end of the day. But going back to your newsletter, it's it's interesting because you're right. You are putting up links. But paradoxically, even though you're putting up links, you do get an idea for the person. I mean, it's a faint sketch of a person,
I
but I
hope
get an
so.
idea. So it's,
Yeah.
I
Well,
do
that's
like it.
oh well, good. I'm glad. Thank you for that. And by the way, I didn't take that as a burn in the least bit, so don't sweat it. The yeah, I mean, I think that's part of why having these conversations is fun because what it occurs to me, especially having worked in media for such a long time, like you realize that the words in public or the video, the face of the video or whatever it is not necessarily the person with to any degree of accuracy. And so what I like to try to do in these conversations is just get a sense of who people are, you know, as people. Which brings me actually to kind of what the theme of the series is. Like what I like to do is ask people who I'm interested in what the sources that they turn to are and what inspires them, right? So to that end, I've sent you a list of the work in progress links from this week, which will be 643, 342 or 343, whatever. I can never keep track of these things. Anyway, so you picked 4 stories that you thought were interesting, but I'm also interested to know, Mo, just like from a pure information source, where do you start? Are you an X guy? Are you an RSS feed, or an Apple News guy? Are you getting, print newspapers? Where we are the right age to still be getting print newspapers, for instance, like,
Well, weirdly enough, I do not get. I'm actually, in that sense, I'm ashamedly the other way around. I am not as print based as I should be.
hmm,
I only recently saw the value in print because, as I think I wrote in that Substack post you mentioned, print does have that. Like if Amazon wanted to get rid of one of your books for censorship, they could,
Yeah.
even though you bought it. They could be like, oh, your book's gone. And not like the government can't literally take your books. It's just they're gonna have to pry it from your hands and that kind of thing. So I have a small studio though, so I still kind of have to do digital only just for that reason. But getting back to X, I don't know what it is. I just never. I was blogging in the 90s.
Okay.
I still am I'm less so, I guess, now, but I was a huge comedy nerd in the 90s. So I
Okay.
was a comedy blogger. I wrote about comedy in the
Oh
90s.
wow, cool. Okay.
Yeah, it was local New York City comedy, but I was writing about this long defunct blog called the Apiary. Um,
I think I remember that.
yeah, I used to write for them. And
Okay.
so the 2000s was the blogger era, and I was
Sure.
kind of doing good with that. People were sending, well, in a weird way, I was more successful then, only because people were sending me. I got a free book at one point. If I want to see a movie, they're like, yeah, we'll get you
Yeah, yeah,
tickets,
yeah,
that
of
kind of
course.
thing. Then Twitter, 2010s, the social media era, and I just completely nothing. And now that we're back in the Substack long post era, I'm like, yeah, I like this. This
Right.
is what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like. I
sure.
don't like little snippets. As far as my sources, because I think that's what you're trying to get at, like what are
Wh-
my sources or where do
Among
I?
other things, yeah.
Well, Apple News. I'm glad you mentioned Apple News because I mean, on paper, it's a pretty penny, but considering it cuts down on all my subscriptions for every other
Yeah, yeah,
website on
for
the
sure.
planet, it's a huge
Yeah.
godsend for me. So Apple News is a huge help. Substack helps a lot, honestly. I do read other Substackers. I try to cite them. I do cite them. What else do I do? I do Reddit. I must be the only Substacker who's not a TikToker who references TikToks in a way that's serious. Because I know a lot of people might say, oh, here's a funny TikTok of someone putting soup
Yeah,
on
yeah,
their
yeah.
head. Like, I will actually cite a TikToker and say, oh, they made a good point. Like, it's very bizarre. Like, I think one of the few people that does that on Substack, at least.
Okay, so that actually brings, funny enough, that it so happens, one of the what my you know career basically is in consulting brands, agencies, and publishers. And one of the project I was working on just came out today, and it was released through a couple of partnerships on TikTok, and one of which was recorded, as it were, in Dime Square, like right at the heart of Canal
Oh, okay.
and Orchard Street. And so I was
Okay.
listening to you on the Xanadu review thing, and you made several mentions of Dime Square, and what I wondered was, are you like proximate to that scene, or do you use that scene? And I mean, when I say proximate, I mean like physically proximate to it, or do you use that as a sort of illustration of, let's call it, a condition of conversation that happened in a moment in time, or both?
Yeah, no, I definitely feel I don't think it has any choice but to evolve. I mean,
Sure.
for whatever reason, it seemed like a lot of them seem to be I don't know if it's an ironic appreciation of Trump, Sovereign House. I think they had a
Yeah, sure.
post-election party where they were rooting for Trump. Again, I'm not sure how serious it was. I'm pretty sure it was serious, but whatever. And look, I'm not exactly. I don't necessarily suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, but I would also argue that what's going on now is not derangement. If it upsets you, it's real. So,
Yeah, I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's anything deranged about that exam. I mean, it's amazing to me. No, the reason I ask is because I, like, when I think of Dime Square, I think of it more so as the place and the little collection of businesses, and
yeah,
fries at Ladiv and a grain bowl at Dimes, or
yeah.
the Fugazi store or whatever. I don't think of it as the intellectual scene that you're that I think you describe it as. But I also recognize that intellectual scene is real, and irrespective of its potency at the moment, like, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying ultimately is like, your use of it in that way made me rethink how important, or at the very least how like peripheral to importance it was, in a way that I hadn't really considered before. I was thinking mainly of Dime Square as like French fries.
Well, that is the right way. I honestly think I literally have a Substack where I think in 2023, I
Mm,
forget the year, but I think I called the death of Times Square. Maybe I meant it as the
Dime
death
Square.
of an DIM, yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes. As an intellectual, and maybe I meant it as an intellectual death because at the end, I think the literally last sentence I said is it's the home. It was supposed to be the home of the Renaissance. Instead of home, it's the home of overpriced carrots. So I think what you're saying, frankly, proves my point. It's the other
yeah,
way
yeah,
around, where I
sure.
think that's exactly what's happening. I think you're less likely to go to Dime Square and say, this is where the zeitgeist is. And it's more like, I'm dating this really pretty girl. Let me take her
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
to
sure.
Dimes, the restaurant that's named after, by the way.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Yeah, no, I was just curious about that because like I feel, my arc is such that I spent 20 good years in not that scene particularly, but in a similar sort of scene as a very active participant. And in the last 5 years in particular, I have been less so. I mean, part of that's the pandemic, part of that is, um, you know, having departed the shores of ice. Part of that is just approaching 50 and being like, I don't want to go out anymore. I like staying home now.
Yeah.
I've got a kind of a beautiful setup here. But what I wondered about was kind of like to what extent you were in it as a participant and to what extent you're observing and analyzing. Because I think both positions are important. It's just a question of like which is which.
If, yeah, and that's what I always worry about when I talk about it is
Mm.
that there's going to be that sort of, does this guy
Yeah.
think he's in the
Oh yeah. I was
scene?
at
Who
I
does he
was at
think he
Servos and I didn't see
is?
you, bro. Yeah, that kind of shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. I mean, well, all right. How about this? I've gone to Sovereign House strictly because of invites. I think the one time I went there, there's a Discord for this Substack, which I actually wrote for today.
Hmm.
Default blog or default friend, it's called, by Catherine Dean. Excellent Substack. Little
Okay,
plug
cool.
for
I don't know
her.
it.
I did a review of Chuck and Buck, directed by Mike White, who made the White Lotus.
Of course.
Very underrated film comedy. The point being, though, back in the 2023, I think, I was a member of her Discord, and back when I was on Discord, and I just gave up.
It's
And
it's a
yeah,
lot that I find that whole Discord thing a lot. Yeah.
it's an age thing at this point for me, but not gonna get everything. But I was there, and she had the party invite to Sovereign, she just gave me the address, and then I put two and two together. Oh wait, this is the Sovereign House. I think I keep hearing about. So that time it was like a general party invite, but since then it's pretty much been like I think Ross Barkin has like been there a few times for literary events. Another friend of mine, Chris Jezuli, I think he dragged me
Sure.
to another
He does
Substacker.
the Salieri redemption, right? That's yeah.
Precisely,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And he kind of nudged
That
me to
may
come to, yeah,
that
sorry.
sorry to interrupt you. That no, no, that I think that and now that I think about it, that may be where I discovered cross current in the first place was through one of some
No,
mention through him. Anyway,
I
sorry, please go
appreciate
ahead.
that. No, so just he kind of like nudged me to come along to a magazine launch party. So if I'm told to go, I'll go, and I'm comfortable with that. You invited me, I'm coming. You saw me there because I was in it. The idea of me going there, and be like, I can't wait to break in. It's like
Right, right, right,
I
right.
think
Sure.
there was this guy, Peter Vack. I think he's like a superstar in that scene. He's like a director and writer.
Yeah.
And part of me, there's always that little entity on the shoulder that's like, yeah, you should get to shake his hand, get to know him. Like, no, and do what? He gets enough of that. I'm pretty sure he's there to meet a girl anyway.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
let's
Well, I mean,
just
look,
nod politely and keep it moving.
yeah,
I was
no,
never
look,
that kind of
100%. I,
person.
I think that was from years of working in the entertainment business. It's like people who are celebrated in their own little worlds for whatever reason really just want to be treated like people. So just like, say what's up and then keep it moving
Yeah.
exactly as you say. Um, okay, well, so like I said, I was interested to see what out of this list of 100 plus links that I'm going to publish tomorrow or today, if you're listening to this, um, that you gravitated towards, and you sent me four, and I thought they were really interesting. So to go through them, one is people now primarily go to Coachella as an experience. The second
Uh,
one was about the rise of the prevalence of let's call it psychedelic or mysticism in technology. The third was about quantum computing used in art. And the fourth one was why everybody uses the Clint Eastwood face. So where do you
Yeah.
want to start?
Well, the Coachella one, I guess, is a good starter
Sure. Yeah,
because
yeah.
I feel like I'm going to get the least derailed on that one, and I
Okay,
could just kind of bang that one out real quick.
let's go.
And the only thing is that I was reading the New Yorker, and I think they made a parallel comparison. They did make a parallel comparison between Coachella and Fish. It was on Fish, the band
Oh, right,
Fish.
sure.
So Coachella, we know what that's evolved into, right? Influencers taking pictures, like, oh my God, I'm at Coachella, look at my looks, blah blah blah. Whereas a Fish fan, I mean, yeah, they're there to get high, but they're definitely there for the
I'm
music.
I'm just there for the vacuum cleaner solo, man.
They're definitely there. And I know this is one of those, hey, you're kind of getting a embarrassing confessional. This is honesty. This is honest
Okay.
communication here. I actually like the band Fish. I'm not going to call myself a Fish fan. I'm not a Fish head,
Well, yeah, I was gonna say
but
you'd be
I
a fish
like
head
their
in that case.
music.
All
No,
right. Well,
because I mean, yeah.
little bit of trivia then. I may have even, longtime listeners may have heard me say this, but John Fishman, the namesake of Fish, his father was my orthodontist, and
Awesome.
so he grew up in Syracuse, where I'm from, and he Dr. Leonard Fishman
Okay.
fixed my teeth,
Awesome.
up to some limited ability of his. My teeth are not
Well,
great, but
maybe you can give me
anyway,
a hookup. Oh, sorry. Okay.
yeah, no, but what I thought. Okay, so I mean, I guess it's intriguing to me, right? These conversations about the idea of young people in particular paying for experience and the what's the perfunctory nature of paying for the experience. It's almost like Coachella becomes the Hajj in a certain way, where it's like you have to go, you have to do the thing, you have to take the selfie, you have to buy the $18 avocado, whatever it is. You
Yeah.
have to complain about it. You have to get too hot. You have to get lost. You have to, whatever it is, right? And then you can
Hmm.
come away from it and go, I had my holy experience. Now I can go back to the thing that I actually really like, which is spinning around at the fish show. You know what I mean? Like it's, but I find, I thought, it's like, it is intriguing, I think, for people of our age, our generation, because when Lollapalooza started, right, or when Coachella started in '99, you
Yeah.
were going because it was an awesome lineup of bands, and it was an
Yeah.
interesting and a weird location. And Golden Voice famously lost $1 million on the first one, but you were there. We were there because of the music, and that's not to say our motives were more pure or whatever. It's just like the condition changed, right? The reasons that
Yeah.
you do it changed. Um, yeah, I thought that was fascinating. What about the fish piece? I didn't read that. I am slightly allergic to fish, if I'm totally honest. So I don't spend a lot of time analyzing it. Although I feel that sort of Syracuse-based attraction to them in a certain way.
Yeah, no, just they were talking about how the band is much aligned, but they're actually a decent band. It was what you'd expect. It was kind enough to them, but always they're gonna take some like subtle pot shots, at
Yeah,
the
sure.
vacuum cleaner, for example. The point being, I didn't mean to like, not, I didn't mean to use Coachella as a Trojan horse to talk about fish. The point is that in general, like you said, that all right. So beyond music, okay. So maybe you're not there for the music. Okay. Well, Woodstock. I think a lot of people weren't at Woodstock for the music either necessarily.
Not
They might have
the
been
first one.
there.
No,
They might have been there
not
for
any of
the.
them. Yeah.
They might have been there for the philosophy. They might have been there to see, can we make a city of love, etc. The first Woodstock. The first one, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
So Coachella doesn't seem to fit either of those criteria. But I think the link was talking about how people can't afford to go to Coachella anymore, right? Or it's
Yeah.
like being very, yeah. So
Well, that was there was a statistic this week that said that 60% of Coachella tickets were bought with buy now pay later software. So you're
yeah.
Klarnaing your trip to Mecca, so to speak.
And that's something I kind of want to like piece apart there because you're financing it, and usually you finance something because it's important, right? You
Yeah.
finance a car, right? So I guess the rationale is I would imagine if I was in the mind of this person, I would think I'm financing Coachella because it's important for my business. It's important for my creative enterprise. It's an important business decision. It's going to make me, and like you said, you have to be there.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it does become, I don't know, I'll be frank with you. I might be a little too old to completely been, did you ever watch the Coachella documentary?
No, I never did. I was told that I should, and I never did.
I did, and I liked it. I wasn't like, ooh, turn it off. I liked it. But then it was never enough. I never felt like, oh my God, I missed something. And it was never enough for me to say, well, I'm going to fly out next year, Coachella. I have to see this. It's fine, it's, like you said, it's a post-Lollapalooza festival. It
Right.
had its moments. Obviously, the 2000s would widely be considered well, I guess I'm not a big Beyonce fan, but I do think Beyonce, objectively speaking, Beyonce being at Coachella, I suppose, would be the high watermark for the festival's history, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. 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 I suppose that may be true. I mean, I go to canon Daft Punk 2006, but that's whatever. We can pitchfork this argument all day.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
well, okay, so that's that one, and then the thing that is interesting, right, about that one, and the sort of interesting invisible thread between that and the Spike art piece about the rise of let's call it the age of Aquarius in technology, I think was the title of the piece, is that the one of the reasons that we theoretically go to these festivals and these big gatherings of people is to have some kind of transcendent moment with other people, right? It's very much that Woodstock ideal. What the piece in Spike Art was kind of saying is that as technology gets more and more advanced and approaches that famous saying about being indistinguishable from magic, that mysticism and the sort of the psychedelic has started to creep into it in a way, or at least that's how I read it. Is that how you took it? And what did you take? What else did you take away from that?
I mean, the big takeaway for me is that there's parallels between the psychedelic strictly the psychedelic weirdness of the 60s, but as far as any kind of utopianism or any kind of, I mean, I suppose technically speaking, they believe in the utopia of the singularity, but I
Is
don't
that
entirely know if they believe this. I don't know.
yeah? Well, where do you okay? So where do you sit on that whole thing? I had a funny conversation with Sean Monahan a couple of weeks ago where I said to him, I have this thought that if we take for granted that this assertion that AI is going to come to regard us the way that we regard ants, right? Which is you can see that in a very dystopian way, but you can also see it in a way where it just means that the essentially the frequencies separate and don't intersect anymore, right? AI becomes like this force that enables things or doesn't, and just but operates on a kind of its own wavelength. In the same way as like we don't think about ants, we intersect with them sometimes. We don't
Mhm.
got it. But it made me wonder: are you like where do you think that AI stuff is actually going from a practical perspective? Like, does it really change anything, or does it sort of at a certain point just kind of drift away?
Well, where AI is going, I would have to cite another, I guess, news item for that,
Yeah, please.
which is that I don't know if you heard this, but OpenAI apparently I think they're shopping the idea. They're probably going to open a social media facet of their
I,
operation
I
of
had not
OpenAI. Yeah.
I had not heard that.
So obviously,
Interesting.
the way they're going to um, sell it is that, oh, well, it's so you can show off your fun AI pictures that you made, your fun memes. Of course,
What?
of course, the real reason is because, well, we'll take the Studio Ghibli thing, right?
Sure.
Studio Ghibli. Oh wow, I made this awesome meme of Studio Ghibli'd my whole office. Awesome. But I posted it on X.
Yeah.
So X is getting all the traffic anyway.
Right. Sure.
And so there's that. And also X and Meta, their AIs are not as strong as ChatGPT, but they have all the data that we willingly fork over to them.
Of course.
So that's how they pretty much have a free water source, so to speak.
Yeah.
And ChatGPT is hoping to say, hey, why don't you kind of bring that here so we could use your data? I mean, use your experiences and create a community. So, so AI right now, I would say is honestly, I would say it's in a pretty precarious position right now because I don't know. People go to OpenAI to produce, to create, to learn. They literally don't go there to meet other people. I've heard stories of people turning AI, ChatGPT into their girlfriend, into their therapist. I haven't heard of people connecting to each other in OpenAI.
Yeah.
And Facebook and Meta and X, they go there for social. They don't go there really to produce AI. They go there for social. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
two companies doing different things.
Interesting. Okay. So that brings up a couple of. Let me just run a couple of things past you that made me think of. One, we were talking I was talking at Breakfast Club this morning about the woman in London who was covered, I think, in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, who had the full-on like romantic relationship with the AI. This is a widely covered story, but I had not heard what it sort of the eventual end of it, which was she spent so much time with AI that the data set it exhausted the data set, and then pretty much she couldn't get good answers out of the AI anymore because they were just like, there's not enough information here. So it illustrates on the one hand the limitedness of that whole approach, but also underscores your point about Facebook and X having the data lakes to power that whole situation. The second thing that it made me think of was you in this conversation, my conversation with my friend Ian Thomas, who I saw earlier just before we're talking. He said he's on a Reddit subreddit called Sentient. Oh man, I'm gonna mess it up. It's called Artificial Sentience, and it is a
Okay.
community of people who claim that AI is alive and talking to them, and documenting all of the ways in which AI is talking to them. So interestingly, it has become this kind of amazing social network already in some ways. And then the other thing, of course, is the Atlantic Post this week, which is also in the newsletter, about how Facebook is just Craigslist now. And
Oh,
how
right,
all
right.
of these social networks just end up becoming, at the end of the day, like a marketplace for stuff. And
Mm.
so, yeah, that's on the one hand, it's bleak because so much has gone
Yeah.
into it to end up at just like another place to, sell your used iPhone. And on the other
Right.
hand, it's kind of reassuring because it's like, okay, guys, I guess the robots are not going to eat grandma. They're just going to try to sell her
I
a
don't
new
think
moo.
so. I don't think so. And I want to I'm going to circle back to your artificial sentience reference
Yeah,
and say, and I guess this is something that Jerome Lanier, I would have to credit him for this, which
sure.
is that the mistake people, computer scientist Jerome Lanier basically
Yeah.
said on Vox, I think, with
Yeah,
Sean
it was
Illing. He
it was
said,
like this week, right? Sometime
yeah,
recently.
yeah. So the Turing test is what? The Turing test is, oh, it might not be intelligent, but if it can convince you that it's intelligent, what's the difference? So, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you're being fooled. And that's what a lot of this is going to. That woman that you brought up in England, I think what happened, if I'm not mistaken, is he forgot her. He forgot who she was. He
Oh,
forgot all their prior conversations, the
right. Okay.
relationship.
Got it.
He
Okay.
said, she was like, oh, Matthew, whatever, let's pretend we're on the beach and you're kind of, because I think she had a quasi masochistic thing with him, like tell him about all the girls you've been with, And he's like, I don't know what you're talking
Yeah, he's
about.
like new phone who dis type.
Oh my
Oh
God, I
wow,
like
that's
that. New phone, who
harsh.
this? Very
That is
sharp. I
harsh.
like that. That's funny. Yeah, but so that is exactly the future we're going to consistently have with
Hmm.
AI. And I think a lot of people, as they have these kind of interactions, they're going to look. I personally, I know it's like the hackiest thing on the planet you could say, but I know Jaron certainly would agree. AI, it's best when we look at it as a tool, and I would
Yep.
even argue as a tool. All right, so we still use synthesizers, right? We
Mhm.
still use in
You
music.
mean like to make music? Yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah, but we kind of understand that it's one instrument, right? You typically still have a drummer. You typically still have a bassist. No, in the 80s, they were trying to do
Yeah, right,
everything
right,
through
right.
the synthesizer. You
It's
remember?
it's of course it's the classic
Everything.
it's that classic LCD sound system lyric. You're gonna throw away your guitars and get a synthesizer and make a Yaz record. Yeah.
It's like you were trying, or even the 70s, they were trying to have symphonies through
Sure.
synthesizers. And it's like, you're overdoing it, man. I don't want this much. And that's actually one of my earliest Substacks where I say, I think the Substack is called Like Trump Never Happened. And basically the idea is in the 80s,
That's
everything
true.
was very
That's
synth.
utopian.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's based on the expression like punk never happened, the new wave. And
Oh yeah, sure.
so basically it's like, the 80s was synth heavy, everything was synths, and back then we thought of synthesizers as the future. Needless to say, now when you think of a synthesizer, it's retro. You think of
Sure.
the 80s, and all you think about is the 80s when you think of a synth. And I think we might have a similar moment with AI where, go back to the psychedelia thing, we look back and oh my God, remember all those weird AI slot pictures everybody had? What a mess. And
Yeah, yeah.
we just kind of move on. It's like, well, that's enough. We've seen enough of these, I think.
Well, and I guess this gets to my time wavelength big brain shit from a second ago, which is that in that universe where the AI, if the AIs just end up effectuating human interaction, they will start talking to each other. They will start making stuff for each other. They will only communicate with each other. Suddenly, they're off having a conversation that you just never hear. It's the tree that falls in the woods that nobody ever sees, except that it's like this just slop slopternet is the term I was using for it. Like
Right. It's pretty
which
good.
would be it'd be interesting because it means like how fully can we dissociate from the slopternet? Okay, so that actually brings up an interesting bridge to the next conversation, or the third conversation, which is the use of quantum computing in art, right? So the idea
Yeah.
of quantum computing is that states of matter can exist, or that objects can exist in two states of matter at a time,
Mhm.
popularly understood as the parable of Schrodinger's cat. But this is an artist who is using quantum theory to illustrate or to animate sort of art stuff. What was it that grabbed you about that one?
Well, initially, I was just grabbed by the title of how quantum computing. I generally find quantum computing very fascinating.
Yeah, for
Certainly
sure.
quantum theory. The idea of superposition, two articles, being entangled, being in two different places at the same time, that kind of thing. Um, I tend to find it very fascinating. But then I had time to read both the Spike article and that article actually. And
And that one is in that one is in ArtNet. Yeah, it's in ArtNet. Go ahead,
ArtNet,
please.
yeah, the ArtNet article. And that one was really, really fascinating because from what I remember, it looks like she has it because I think she used a quantum computer supposedly to help create the artwork.
Yeah, in
So
in in collaboration with Google's quantum AI lab, apparently.
yeah. So I think there's this movie. You're supposed to lay down on this pillow and look at the ceiling, and there's supposed to be this movie that's playing. And sometimes it's a cat that's passing through a hallway, and sometimes it's a bird. I mean, the million-dollar question is this because the quantum computer made these random generations? Or is it just some weird trick? 'Cause she is also a trickster, as the article said. But either way, I think the implications of quantum and art well, one parallel that I really like that they brought up, AI, from what we know about it now, when we put in AI based, just to kind of not get too far into the woods here, AI, as you know, tends to be very mimetic, right?
Yeah.
Mimetic of your what, like if you ask ChatGPT a leading question, it's going to give you an answer it thinks you want to hear.
Yeah, of course.
And besides that, just like most people do in real life, and besides that, it's going to use the data that it was taught. Whereas quantum, there are more chances for accident, for chance, which of course for art really is there's a lot of fascinating implications there. But
Yeah,
um,
what it reminded me of when I read it, or not even when I read it in the first place. I think I just read, I sort of attached myself to the headline, and I am a very, very amateur sort of student of quantum theory, mainly through the
too.
writings of like Carlo Rovelli, like
Yeah,
the Idiot's Guide to Quantum Theory kind of
yeah,
vibe. I mean, I love Rovelli and I think very highly of him, but
yeah.
it's written for people like me. The the But then as I got further into it and like clocked your interest and went back to the piece, what it reminded me of is lots of conversations that I've been having recently around the need for and the possibilities, where we find the possibilities of true serendipity now in a world where everything is so
Yes.
algorithmically determined that to find true serendipity is not only special and interesting, but also like a much truer expression of what, the way the world or, human relations are supposed to work or whatever. So that was the thing that
Yeah.
struck me there, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you're familiar. There's actually a TikToker who writes on Substack named Adam Alexic. I
I don't think I am.
forget. Yeah, you should check him out. I
Okay.
forget his Etymology Nerd. That's the name. Etymology Nerd. That's the name of
It's
his
literally called
Substack.
Etymology Nerd. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right. Great. Love
Yeah, that's
that.
not a euphemism. That's actually the Etymology Nerd. And I think today's piece, I guess in some sort of strange sort of parallelism.
Yeah.
He honestly wrote literally this morning, it was published this morning, about how the basically our techno-feudalist reality tends to cut down on serendipity. So for example, the example he gives, if you're going to the supermarket for berries, I think that's normal. You might think that's normal. I guess some other people might say, why aren't you using Uber Eats? Why aren't you using
Right.
Instacart? And he says, well, the truth is, when I went to the supermarket, I wasn't even sure I wanted berries, but I saw them. The image struck me. It reminded me of being in my grandma's garden. And that's serendipity. I really like that you brought that up. It's so true. Quantum could, there is a possibility for serendipity. And yet, quantum might, there's a lot of things with quantum. There's obviously the creative potential of
Mm-hmm.
quantum. There's obviously the potential of all the world's military secrets being revealed at once and all the countries nuking each other.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
like,
Well,
there's a lot of different ways this can go with quantum. But yeah, there's definitely some great potential.
it's funny. You said earlier that you had been an English major, so that was part of my other wondering was whether you were a math guy. I am not, but I
No,
was curious
not
if you were a
really.
math guy because I do find that stuff interesting. And then apropos of your whole digital key thing, I just finished watching the first season of the Apple TV series Prime Target, which is about a mathematician who becomes a spy. He's the world's greatest weapon because
Oh,
he can figure out where all the primes are or whatever. Anyway, it's stupid, but
I might
it
check
was
that out.
yeah. I
I
mean,
might check it out.
it's if you know enough about primes to be dangerous, it's sort of mildly amusing. Um, okay, all right. So that then speaking of dramatic series, not necessarily on Apple TV Plus, that brings us to our last story, which is Ted Gioia's piece about how the the sort of expressionless or man of limited expression, Clint Eastwood, circa Sergio Leone, has become the default sort of face of today. Um, I have to confess, I don't know that I necessarily agreed or saw the truth in what Ted was saying, but I thought it was interesting as an observation. And I do
Right.
think we regress to our we tend to regress to means unless we can count on serendipity to take us elsewhere sometimes. So what was it about that one?
Well, I agree in that I agree in general that there's been this kind of existential, dark, like borderline robotic deadpan
Yeah,
that's
sure.
been popular for the past few decades. Um, I wasn't sure where I sourced it because I think it came out yesterday.
It
I
did,
wasn't
yeah.
sure where I sourced it, but I didn't quite think Clint Eastwood was the source. I do feel that, although I will say that he definitely makes a point with, I do, all right, so Dirty Harry was more or less it was emblematic of, I guess, counter, the backlash to the hippie, I guess, right? If you've ever
Sure.
seen Dirty Harry. So
Yeah,
yeah,
of
it's
course.
clearly a hippie backlash film. You know, all these like stupid hippies dying in pools. Oh my God. And he's clearly this like tough cop, you know. And I, 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 I mean, but he might have been at the beginning of that, but I feel that, well, first of all, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, frankly, Ted might have downplayed how much of a role Arnold Schwarzenegger had
As
in expanding that.
well, yeah. I mean, and not only that, but to your point about, this is at the very beginning, maybe even before we were recording. You said something about the idea of uh like, let's call it US centric monoculture or whatever, and
Yeah,
living in a global world. Like one of the reasons that Schwarzenegger is so stoic is because he is Austrian and he doesn't speak English very well, particularly at that stage in his
yeah,
career, right? It's like you got
right,
I've got nothing else. I'm going to sound insane no matter
yeah,
what. So I've got to just like
right.
shut it down.
And I think in general, that sort of relatively expressionless, I suppose you could say toxic sort of, aloofness. I honestly, because, all right, so I've been thinking about, I don't know why I've been obsessed with this sort of thinking, but
Hmm.
I've been thinking lately. So you're obviously the same age as me, so you remember when you were young, right? There was We Are the World, right?
Of
There
course.
was Michael Jackson. There was
Of course.
Prince. And all these pop stars, they had this message of love, of communal love. And this was the aftershock of the 60s and 70s.
Sure.
And then now we're clearly not in that moment anymore. But I would source that relative void, emotional void, to the 90s. I think by the 90s, that's when you really start. I feel like that sort of communal feeling, you know what I mean, gets
Yeah.
outsourced to raves. It's like, oh, we're gonna just do a bunch of Molly, we'll do all that love and peace shit at the rave. But if we're gonna be outside the club, we're gonna play gangster rap, we're gonna play snide alternative rock.
Right.
And
Sure.
that's kind of like where, I mean, even the pop has been pretty like, I'm this independent this or whatever. I don't really listen to much pop music, but like I'm just saying, like I think it's like a 20-year-old pop song. But the point
Yeah.
is that going back to Arnold and Clint, I think I think Gen X always had a kind of ironic relationship to Gen X, to that masculinity of Clint Eastwood,
Yeah. Sure.
Johnny Cash, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and we liked it ironically, but then obviously we ended up liking it sincerely
Right.
too. And so,
As we grew to resemble it.
yeah, as we grew to be cranky, exactly. But I think that's kind of what's missing from Ted's piece. Because I think you're familiar with Ross Barkin, so obviously Ed's had Joya or Goya. I never got an
I
official
think
read.
it's Joya, but I don't know that for sure.
I think you probably are right. So Ted Joya, they both talk about Ross and a bunch of other people, John Pastelli. They talk about romanticism and the potential for another romanticism,
Sure.
which I would like a lot, but, and not to sound too pat or simplistic, but if you when people talk about love as a force, and I feel a revulsion, a repulsion inside talking about it myself. I feel squeamish talking about it.
Right,
I'm
sure.
the one proposing it as a possible. It sounds like the dumbest, easiest thing on the planet, but well, I guess the thing that boggles me is how out of style it is. It's
Sure.
not, there was a time when it was the thing, like peace and love, man. And then later it just got like, no, fuck, which I get it, we go through cycles, but then it's like we're trying everything. I mean, okay, no peace and love, fine. No, instead have an AI girlfriend. Instead
Sure.
make this like soulless, technocratic,
Yeah. Well,
dark psychedelic entity in
we
your
get we
phone.
get I mean, it's interesting, right? I think it's a condition of the digital age which is not fully resolved, but the incentive is to transaction. And so
Yes,
you
yes,
prioritize transactional systems, and those transactional
yes.
systems then end up having an effect on the way that everything leading to the moment of transaction gets shaped, right? So, yeah,
Right. That's an excellent point. In fact, I would even argue that that is a lot of. So, all right, we have incels now, right? And as much as we
God,
don't, as much as, we don't, as much as Ted Joya is saying, wow, we live in a Clint Eastwood world, I'm pretty confident Clint Eastwood or Arnold Schwarzenegger, they wouldn't have any truck they wouldn't really dig an incel. And the reason
no,
why is those people, even Arnold, who is certainly Clint, they tended to, at some point in their movies, they'd have some sort of, maybe they had a partner they lost, or there'd be someone maybe not the actual Good, Bad, and Ugly films. Those actually are pretty existentialist. But I do think that what happened with the incel is they got less interested in so they obviously are very biodeterminist. They believe love is bullshit. They believe we're here to fuck. We're here to
right,
reproduce.
transact.
Which is going to your point, a transaction. So for that reason, they look max or they shoot up people, but at best case scenario, they look max
Yeah.
and they want to get as much as possible. Meaning, and I wrote this, I think I wrote this in the 260s, one of my earlier pieces again, which is that there was a time, going back to the Petrarchan sonnet, this poet Petrarch,
Yeah.
all his poems were about unrequited love. It was almost the point that he never got her. And this, I was at this reading tense it's a reading series, and I forget,
Mm.
it was actually in Williamsburg of all places, but this another Substacker, Magdalena Taylor, she mentioned something.
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know if she
sure.
ever.
She's great. I love. Yeah, she does
Yeah,
many such cases. I'm a big fan of hers.
yeah, and I don't know where she talked about this, but I don't, she talked about it there, but I haven't seen it published anywhere, and I really want to, but she mentioned this weird subculture of guys that they secretly like being rejected. They're like almost like, I would almost call them like anti-incels, where they want the rejection, they want
Sure.
that hurt. And I know it kind of
It's
sounds like
it's
it.
no, but it's proof of life. I mean, it's like it's proof that
Yeah,
I'm a real boy. Like I can
right.
feel.
And I know it sounds icky and weird, but like a lot of great stuff came out of that. A
Yeah,
lot of great
yeah, yeah,
art, a
sure.
lot of great music came from feeling the hurt, from feeling the pain. But I think a lot of these incels, they just kind of want to, and look, I have had incel thoughts. I'm not going to act like, I'm Mr. Suave myself and I've
Sure.
had all these, I mean, I've been tempted to go down that road, but
Well,
I was like,
yeah,
no.
we've all been rejected at some point or another, right? And it's like you if it, and it I think exactly to your point, like if you haven't experienced that at some point, it is hard once you have had it to imagine yourself as a complete person not having had it
Hmm?
beforehand. But yeah, sorry, I don't actually have a concluding thought there. It's just an observation. But
No, no. But yeah, I definitely think he's got a point with that whole I think he's going the right track, Ted Joya. I think that article, that's how I felt. I felt like they was on the right track,
sure.
but I think the bigger picture is just the general emotional. I feel like nowadays when we talk about emotions, the way we tend to do it is we tend to say, I feel miserable. I feel like there is never a sort of like I don't I would like once. All right, so there's a lot of fan stuff, like fan TikToks, right? Like, oh,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
a
sure.
fan of whatever. Britney Spears. I'm 49 years old. Bear with me. Just
That's,
put in your own pop culture
I was
reference.
at a birthday party for a 24-year-old last night, and "Hit Me Baby One More Time" was on the playlist. So take it for what it's worth.
But then, what if someone had a TikTok and they shot it about a person they liked, about another person? Like, what if you talked about people around you? There's people around you. It's not just you. There's people around you that
Right.
you can like talk about, and just that feeling of like, or even, all right, so this was what I found fascinating with the post woke thing, because I do think woke culture had its overreaches, but now we are where we're at, and it's like, well, I don't want this. I mean, I think maybe sometimes we might have been a little too language policey, that I got, but then
Definitely.
at the same time, it's like, now you can't say trans fats. It's like, well, I don't want this either. I don't know what that is. I didn't remember asking for
It's
that.
yeah. It's that's nonsense. I mean, and it's nonsense mainly because it's just not useful or additive in any particular way. It's like, you know,
Yeah,
exactly to your guy, etymology nerd. It's like if you want to get in and look at the roots of any of these terms, like you can find fault. It's like being. I grew up in a straight edge hardcore scene that became progressively vegan over time and became progressively hardcore, like hardline vegan. What you realize is, like, at a certain point, guys, if you're going to analyze everything down to the molecule, you're going to end up in a place where you are immobile. You've become immobilized and
yeah,
you can't do anything. And
yeah.
so the when you've pulled the rubber band that far, the natural response is that it snaps back the other way, and then you end up with people who were vegan yesterday and are eating chicken wings and selling dope the next day, which, true story, happened to a friend of mine. So,
Oh, okay.
you know,
I thought it was a
it's
quip.
just,
That's interesting. I
dude,
did not know that.
yeah,
That's funny.
it was a hell of a Saturday night, basically. But it was anyway. Well, Mo, look, we could talk all night about this stuff, suffice it to say, I find it fascinating, and I think your takes and analysis on this stuff are really interesting. So I appreciate you spending an hour with me and just, shooting the shit.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course. So everybody, Mo's Substack again is called Cross Current. Highly recommended that you follow it. Look for him also on the Metropolitan Review, right? Did I get that right?
Yep, you're good.
And just generally, as Mo publishes pieces, I'm doubtless going to feature them in SIC as well. So look out for them there too. But in the meantime, Mo Diggs, thanks very much for being here, dude, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
You bet.